All righty, welcome back for another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Wednesday, October 5th, halfway through the week, almost ready for OU Texas. I know some people that are watching this and some people that are OU fans aren't very excited about this game coming up. I am the complete opposite. I am always excited. I don't care. At the end of the day, it's a rivalry game. I don't care if OU's a 21-point underdog. OU's always got a shot, just like Texas always has a shot whenever they're a mess. So it's a big game. It's fun. I'm jealous of everyone that gets to go to this game. Going to OU Texas was always a highlight when Jose and I were in college, and it was a fun long weekend down in Dallas, and we won most of the time when we went, so that was also nice too. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking some injury updates. OU, they had like 10 people either get hurt and left the game or didn't play initially, and they were out already from the week before. So we're going to talk injury updates. We're going to be talking quarterback situation because a lot of people are obviously talking about between Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel. There's a lot of mystery going on. Who's playing, who's not playing. We're going to talk a little bit about Trevor Knight's quote as well about how it's a wasted season in Norman already. And we're going to just talk about general OU football and OU Texas coming up for Saturday. But before we get into it, I just want to say we appreciate it. We're over 5,100 subscribers. If you're new to the channel or if you've been here multiple times, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. Turn that notification bell. We are planning to go live Saturday morning before the OU Texas game at 9 a.m. Central to discuss and preview the game. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. A lot of people would like to talk about what's going on. So be sure to have that notification bell on so you know when we go live. Like the video. If you're already subscribed, like the video. Stay around for the end of video challenge that Jose is going to put out, or comment throughout the video, depending on what we're talking about. And when you comment and like the video, it helps us out a ton. So please do that. If you hadn't already, hit the like button now, please. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. That helps us out a lot on that algorithm as well. All right, so we'll get into it. So OU Texas, today's Wednesday. You have game week. Obviously, OU's rolling in 3-2, same as Texas, both 3-2. Two totally different feelings around the programs coming into this game, both unranked, which is a very rare thing. That doesn't happen very often, where both teams are not doing so hot. Texas is coming off of a win, and OU is obviously coming off 2 straight losses. And Texas is currently a 7-point favorite according to Vegas. So, Jose, what are some initial thoughts? What are you thinking of this game? Just some general feelings around the team. I don't know if you've seen the podcast on the Prairie where Braden Willis was talking about the team. What do you think?
I have not seen the podcast on the Prairie. To be honest, I don't watch it very often. I'll watch clips every once in a while. Maybe I should just to hear from Braden every couple weeks. But I think this weekend last weekend we all expected them to come out and have some fire under their asses after getting embarrassed by Kansas State. That didn't happen. They actually just got embarrassed by TCU instead. We've seen Texas at least wake up for a big game this year when it came to the Alabama game. Now, it was at home, so they did have, and I think that home field advantage was big for that game. This being a rivalry game, it might be a little bit different, but we've seen that team at least wake up for a big game. We've yet to see Oklahoma wake up for a big game against at least a good opponent. Nebraska was a big game, but Nebraska was in shambles. They kind of stink. Not that Oklahoma's doing any better right now, but at that point in the year, Nebraska looked terrible, and Oklahoma was looking like they were about to do something special. If this Oklahoma team can wake up, realize, I think Venables better than anyone knows that, at least on the coaching staff. Probably actually not. Venables knows it's a rivalry game and a big time one. He emphasized it for Nebraska week. A lot of these guys that have been here for a year understand what Red River's like. They know the environment. The freshmen might be a little overwhelmed, and we'll kind of touch on that when we talk about the players a little later. But I think they need to be prepared for both a hostile and friendly environment And if you don't come out hot, if we have a slow start like we have been the last 2 weeks, even 3 weeks, it's going to suck. Because if Quinn Ewers is back like is expected to be, that Texas offense looked way better with Quinn Ewers and with Hudson Card. And in my opinion, I don't think it's very equal. Hudson Card's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but Quinn Ewers was making that offense run really well against Alabama. And if there are Texas fans watching, I would agree with him that they could have and probably should have won that Alabama game if it weren't for some flags going against them. Um, this could easily be a 4-1 Texas going up against a 3-2 Oklahoma, because I think really the one loss where you're like, all right, Texas definitely got beat this game is the Texas Tech one, which Texas Tech is starting to become a rival for them. And Oklahoma got embarrassed 2 weeks in a row. You can't let it happen 3 times. That is just unacceptable. Even if we lose this game, at least make it look competitive. The offense needs to look good. The defense needs to at least stop making those dumb mental mistakes. And that's outside of penalties, because penalties mainly on the offensive side have killed drives and momentum that the little that Oklahoma has gotten over the last 2 games.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So first you talk about the quarterback situation. Obviously, yeah, Quinn Ewers, there's reports saying that he could be back, could not be back. Does Sarkisian put him in, or what's the deal? No one way or another for sure, but it's kind of similar to Oklahoma. No one knows what OU is going to do. Obviously last week losing Gabriel middle of the game at TCU, they rolled out Davis Bevel. And I got a few, we got a few comments in the last video where we talked about, Davis Bevel not looking great and various other things, and saying, the coaches know more than we do, which is totally fair. I totally get that. And I 100% agree that I'm not going to sit here and be an armchair kind of coach, sitting from the couch kind of coach. But at times I am willing to live with a quarterback that is young and is going to take chances and is a gunslinger and is learning on the fly and has that spark, has that, high ceiling feel to him. Like Davis Bevel came in and he looked extremely uncomfortable. He looked like he was scared to throw the ball because he was so scared to make a mistake. And obviously, whenever they weren't, when he was trying to not make a mistake, he was making mistakes. And he just didn't have that spark to me. Now, someone like either a General Booty or a Nick Evers, more specifically, Nick Evers might have the highest ceiling out of the 3. I think that's fair to say that he has the highest ceiling. Like if Nick Evers got rolled out on Saturday because Gabriel can't play, I'd be willing to live if Evers threw a couple of picks, because I'm willing to bet he's going to make a few plays and give us at least a fighting chance. Now, with me, saying all of that, Gabriel was at practice on Monday. He did go back on the sidelines at TCU, at the TCU game, which is a good sign for as far as concussions go, because typically you want to be in a dark room and various other things to stay out of the light. Well, he went back on the sidelines. He was practicing, or at least in a jersey, maybe taking mental reps or whatever they were doing. He was present at practice on Monday. Now, I don't know what about Tuesday. I'm sure he was there. If he was there Monday, I'd imagine he's there Tuesday. We really won't know about Dillon Gabriel probably, I'm guessing, until Thursday or Friday. My gut is telling me that Gabriel plays. If he's showing up and he's going out on the practice field at this point, this early in the week, and at least maybe throwing a ball or taking mostly mental reps, that has to say that he's in a good place, more than maybe I would have expected initially, because I wouldn't have expected him to be there Monday. A lot of times in the NFL, those guys are out till Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the practice or whatever. So I think Gabriel ultimately plays, but if he can't, I want Nick Evers to play or General Booty. I just don't want Davis Bevel, and I feel like at least General Booty has some sort of level of collegiate experience, and he's a gunslinger, and he probably will give the team a spark. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think the comments that you brought up were fair from the last video, but at the end of the day, if we can see something as with some of the people think we're just dumb guys just watching football and giving our commentary. Guaranteed that the coaches saw it as well. There's no way that the coaches saw what Davis Bevel did and can confidently say this guy can lead the team to a victory. I understand that through fall camp he was, and it sounds like the reason he was named the backup was because he was able to keep the ball secure, which is fine. But sometimes, especially at this point in the season, and we'll talk about Trevor Knight's quote in a little bit too, you don't really have much to lose anymore. You don't. We're not competing for a Big 12 championship more than likely. Like that would take a miracle. You'd have to pretty much run the table from here on out, which I don't think anyone expects out of this Sooner team with how they've looked after these last 2 weeks. Just put in one of the younger guys, General Booty or Nick Evers. I understand that there is ball security issues, but at least they're trying to make a play. I think that's one positive. Obviously, you don't want these guys to be throwing the ball in danger, because we did just get a year and a half of Spencer Rattler doing that under an offense that was very productive. And even though he ended up having good stats, 1 year he was still putting the ball in danger way too much. Nick Evers or General Booty, if they're doing, maybe slightly better than Spencer Rattler did at Oklahoma, then throw him in, give him a chance. You just can't. Davis Bevel just didn't look like a quarterback that can lead the Sooners to a victory on the offensive side of the ball, and the offense was already struggling enough with Dillon Gabriel. Now, like you mentioned, Dillon Gabriel, it does seem, just from observing, the concussion isn't a one that can knock him out for multiple weeks. If he is out for this week, this is probably the only week, because he is out in the light. It doesn't seem like there's light sensitivity, and there's nothing too much to worry about. Again, just from observing, obviously the medical staff knows better at that point, and nothing's really been released about his status and his symptoms. But hopefully he can play. I think we saw, and we mentioned it in Sunday's video, there is an extreme drop off from Dillon Gabriel to the rest of the group, and that's something we mentioned in the preseason. Parker Thune mentioned it. He even tweeted about it. No matter what you feel Dillon Gabriel can't do, the guys behind him can't do it any better. And we saw it last week with Davis Bevel coming in. And that's just a fact. Even the coaches know it. For those that want to say that we don't know anything and coaches know better, the coaches know it. That's why he's the starting quarterback. Hopefully, and I think if Dillon can play, the offense should hopefully be fine, at least manage the game. The defense is the one that needs to step up. The defense cannot play as bad as they did against this Texas offense, no matter who the quarterback is. If Quinn Ewers is a quarterback again, I think that's when Texas offense is at its peak, and they can be more dangerous. But if Hudson Card's there, it might actually be slightly more intimidating, because he can run. As long as his ankle is fine, which I know it's something he's dealt with over the last few weeks. If his ankle is fine and he can run a little bit, that's a dangerous formula to beat the Sooners. Clearly, we cannot stop the run. And if they have Bijan Robinson back there, a guy that's known to be one of the best running backs in the country at the college level, and a quarterback who can just kind of run, Oklahoma's going to get shredded. And that should definitely be a concern. Hopefully, Roof and Venables and Bates and Chavis, Hall and Valai got together and were trying, because the corners need to be better at turning their head. Way too many PI calls. And I know that those receivers were bigger, but the Texas receivers might be faster. And if they're just going to try to tackle these guys before the ball gets there, we're just going to see the Texas offense just kind of walk downfield without really ever being challenged. Hopefully, I think the biggest key for the defense is Billy Bowman being able to come back. I know his injury was pretty bad, but if he can convince the coaches that he's able to play on the defensive side of the ball only, at least for this week, let him play, because Xavier Worthy is a speedster, and I don't care what corner we put on him. I don't think any of the corners at Oklahoma can keep up with him step for step, and Billy Bowman's is the fastest athlete on the defensive side of the ball. And if he's not back there to try to protect anything going over the top of our corners, it's going to be a shitty Saturday.
Yeah, speaking more of injuries in that secondary, obviously Woody Washington was banged up in that TCU game. He seems to have gotten better since that game. Now I know he was dealing with some injuries going into the TCU game. He seems to be improving. Hopefully, Billy Bowman is available, because I do agree with you. If Billy Bowman's not there, the drop off at the safety position is significant. And I think we talked before we got on the show, Harrington looked pretty lost. I feel like a Trey Morrison has to get some run in that position. He might not be the biggest. I know he's not, but he's played a lot of football, and hopefully he can be at the right spot at the right time as the plays are being called. Looking along the defensive line, you've R. Mason Thomas, who's expected to come back. Not sure on Marcus Stripling, but I think R. Mason Thomas provides some much needed depth. Looking at the offensive line, Wanya Morris probably won't be back for this game, but everyone else is most likely going to be back. So we're going to be going back to that, where we have the right tackle position open. So, let's talk about that. So what does Oklahoma do? Does Oklahoma switch and put Anton Harrison in the right tackle position and put Guyton at left tackle? Do they leave Anton Harrison at left and put Jacob Sexton at right tackle? What do you think they do? I don't think that flipping Harrison to right tackle and putting Guyton at left is the right decision, because it's so hard for a player to, as a tackle, to go. Very few people can play left tackle and right tackle at a very, very high level at a moment's notice. It's not common for anyone to be able to switch everything, because you got to do everything backwards. Left foot's going back when you're a left tackle, right foot's going back when you're a right tackle. It's different. What do you think?
Yeah, I think switching, we've already seen what Anton looks like on the right, and it's like you said, it takes a very special talent to be able to flip like that on a moment's notice. And not that he's not talented, but it seems like the left side is definitely the side to stick to for him. It seems like it'd be better to bring in either Guyton or Sexton on the right side. Looking at the games from this year, we saw what Anton looked like on the right with Guyton on the left. It was fine, but not. That was when the offensive line was at, I would say, its worst this season. And people can argue that, but in my opinion, I think that the offensive line looked at its worst that season, or that game. When Anton was flipped back to the left and Guyton was given an opportunity on the right, line still didn't look amazing, but at least it was able to hold up a little better. Like you said, Anton seemed more comfortable doing with his technique on the left side, and it seems like Guyton has gotten a lot more comfortable with the right side, and I'm assuming with 5 more weeks of practice reps on the right side of the line, he should feel more confident now in real game situations. If Sexton is given a nod, I don't think that there'd be a huge drop off there from Guyton or Sexton, but Guyton seems to have been kind of gotten the nod from the coaches as the replacement on that right side of the line if Wanya is to get hurt like he is this week, it seems.
Definitely. And I would like to see Anton stay at the left tackle position. I'd like to see Guyton and Sexton get a run at right tackle, give Guyton the nod first to start the game at right tackle and see how he holds up. If it's a disaster, I would see if Sexton could come in and do something. Give some run for the young guys. Give them. At this point, we've talked about there's not a whole lot to lose. And something I think we need to also talk about is along the defensive line. OU played a lot of 3-man front against TCU. OU doesn't really have a true nose tackle on this defensive, on this roster. So why they're running a three-man line, I'm not 100% sure. And obviously they have not been able to generate much pass rush. I know they've been trying to, blitz and send linebackers and various other things. I don't quite understand why they're not running a 4-man front, not with, throw out Jeffrey Johnson and co. and then throw Downs and Grimes off the edge. And I just feel like, especially with a mobile quarterback, I think part of the reason why they're running a 3-man front, now that I'm saying I don't know why, but my logic, and I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if they're running a 3-man front thinking that they need more fast guys on the field to be able to contain Duggan at the time, a mobile quarterback. And I would argue you need to run 4-man fronts to be able to kind of contain him in the pocket. Keep a quarterback in the pocket, not let them escape. Don't make your linebackers make open field tackles if they don't have to. Keep them in the pocket. And I feel like you're able to do that better in a 4-man front. I'd like to see OU go more to that and try to keep either Hudson Card or Quinn Ewers in that pocket and not let them roll out and maybe actually generate some pass rush. What do you think?
Yeah, the pass rush has been really bad these last 2 weeks. I mean, we really haven't seen much of Reggie Grimes and Ethan Downs. Our Mason Thomas, I think, could be a huge help here in bringing in depth. Being able to rotate him in for Downs, because it seems like he was getting rotated in for Downs a lot more than Grimes at the beginning of the season, or just rotating him for either guy, just to give the offensive line a different guy to work against. They both have different tendencies. Thomas is a guy that really doesn't have much tape out there that the Texas offensive line can study. So it could be a little bit of surprise guy there for them to kind of get in their heads a little bit too much instead of playing freely. And Grimes can come in these situations. I think it gives those pass rushers a little bit more freedom because the offensive line is having to worry about multiple guys and different tendencies and techniques that the guys use, right? Not sure why they're using a 3-man front. I agree. Through the first couple of weeks, and correct me if I'm wrong, it really didn't seem like they were running too much of a 3-man front. We saw a lot of a four-man defensive line in the first few weeks. And maybe because they thought they needed more fast guys out there, but the fastest linebacker we have is Deshaun White or Danny Stutzman. Like Ogwegbu is really slow, and that he hasn't, even though he lost a lot of weight and probably has gotten faster from last season, he's just not fast enough to keep up with a mobile quarterback. And if you were to remove him from the equation and just have Danny and White out there, or hopefully Danny and Jaron, in my opinion, I still think Jaron needs more time, then throw them out there. Those guys are those 3 linebackers are the 3 fastest linebackers. Jaron Kanik is an absolute freak athlete. Give him some time. I mean, I've been on here trying, voicing my opinion that Jaron Kanik needs playing opportunities because the Nebraska game, it was a Nebraska game, right? He came in for a half and he led the team in tackles after only playing 2 quarters. And I know Deshaun White was having a really good game before that targeting call. But that's essentially half of a game that Jaron Kanik had to make up in tackles, and he surpassed everyone else on the team. Just give him a chance.
I 100% agree. I feel like he needs to have a chance. And, we'll talk more about this on Friday's show as more of a, specific game preview, but I'm really curious to see what the mindset of this team is and how they come in. Do they come in with a chip on their shoulder? And I alluded to earlier about the podcast on the Prairie, and I will be transparent. I didn't listen to the entire thing, but basically the general gist that I got from the little bit that I did watch or listen to was that Braden Willis basically said that, there's a lot of younger guys that feel like you come in, play for Oklahoma, you've got that logo on your helmet, that teams that you're playing against are going to lay down and not really, they'll be intimidated by you. But then he came back with, it's actually the complete opposite. It's actually, it puts a bullseye on you. You're a target. You're everyone's Super Bowl. You are the big fish that everyone's chasing. And I think the mindset is there's a little bit of maybe entitlement, thinking that you're because you're part of Oklahoma, teams are going to lay down, they're scared of you, and that whole mindset. And I think part of that is still, like we've talked about, this culture is Brent Venables is trying to erase that mindset from all these guys of, hey, I don't care if we're Oklahoma. You need to come in as if we're, nobody and play with our hair on fire. And I think that's what he's going through right now, is trying to convince these guys that you need, just because you're Oklahoma doesn't mean you're anything at this point. You're all even. It doesn't matter if you came in as a 5-star or a walk-on. You have to play with a chip on your shoulder and everyone's coming after you. And I think that's hopefully going to hit home with them. Hopefully this narrative that OU is going to get blown out. You know, all the national media is like, what is wrong? Brent Venables, what are you doing? Yada, yada, yada. I will say, I feel like that this is a game where we've been on the other side as Texas, the heavy favorites, the ones that like, dude, Texas has got no shot, all this other stuff. I mean, do you remember whenever we were in college when Tyrone Swoops was there with Charlie Strong, when they were a train wreck?
Yeah.
And somehow they came out and played the game of their season and beat us. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen Saturday, but it has the feeling to me. And anytime you start really doubting one of these programs coming into this game, I think there's a possibility. Now, I might look like an idiot. Maybe I'm being too much of a homer and too much of a, sunshine pumper, I guess you could say. But from my experience, when a team is being counted out going into a rivalry game, it's generally closer than a lot of people think. And that's my opinion. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, to refer back to that game, it was in 2014, right? That Texas game, and it was close, but Oklahoma was able to come out and win. I think you mentioned it. Sorry, I was looking it up because I was also thinking about Trevor Knight, because I know we're going to talk about him. You have to be able to wake up and do something. And it's like I said, you're right. This year's Texas is favored, and even with even though we have the same record, I think in most people's minds, at least when you look at national media and maybe more objective people watching the sport, Texas is way better than what their record says at 3-2. And Oklahoma is kind of the 3-2 team because we have been killed, and the 3 teams we beat were teams you were supposed to beat. And Texas is getting that, I guess, is getting the favoritism because not just because of the Texas brand, and I know people might say that it is the case, but they almost beat an Alabama team who's currently number 2 in the country, if I remember correctly from the AP poll. So they almost beat that team. Oklahoma hasn't had that performance where you can be like, yeah, that's a team that can beat any playoff team any given night. Not yet. I think this is the weekend where Oklahoma needs to show that they have the ability to. Hopefully we win, but even a close loss, moral victories aren't amazing, but even a close loss would make everything seem a slightly better. It would at least start trending in the right direction, because we can't get embarrassed 3 weeks in a row as Oklahoma. That name on the chest might not make people it won't make people just lay down and take an L, but it will get people to absolutely shit on you if you look like a terrible team on the football field. That's just the facts. I mean, 2 weeks ago, you had people saying Oklahoma might be one of the best teams in the country. You get embarrassed by 2 opponents you probably should have beaten on paper, and now people are talking as if Oklahoma and this season means absolutely nothing, and you might as well just sit out for the rest of the year because you're going to lose every game. Like, that's just not the case. You got to show that you can win games.
For sure. And yeah, that Tyrone Swoops where he played like crazy. Yeah, you're right. OU barely won. But then the following year, Tyrone Swoops and I don't know if you remember Jared Hurd were combined together in the game, threw for 55 yards. And, Tyrone Swoops ended up throwing a touchdown and scoring a touchdown, and OU lost 24-17 in that game. And going in that game, Texas was 2-4, or they're 1-4 going into that game, and OU was undefeated. So, it's just, you just never know. And maybe I'm too much of looking at the bright side. And I just believe that this game will be closer than most people think. Not saying that OU wins, but I do think it's going to be close. Moving on to what old Trevor Knight had to say, former Oklahoma quarterback Trevor Knight. He said, quote, "You're not going to win the Big 12 title game. It is a failed season already in Norman, if you ask me." End of quote. Okay. And he went on a podcast, I don't know, whatever, the Field of 12 After Dark podcast, whatever that platform is. But he was talking about Oklahoma and basically said that the season's already a failure. And while that is true in some regard, I feel like OU, yeah, we're not competing for a national title because that is the standard at Oklahoma. There is an outside chance that Oklahoma could compete for the Big 12 title. Starts this weekend. OU has to win out. I mean, things can happen. OU still has Texas this weekend, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Kansas. Got Kansas on the schedule. Might have to look out for them. But basically, it's a failed season. And to OU standard, yeah, maybe it is. But here's the deal. I think a lot of younger guys are going to get opportunities to play. I think Brent Venables is going to get a lot of valuable time to coach these players. I think there's going to be a lot of good culture building and adversity that these young guys are facing right now. And I don't think that can be understated about how important it is to be getting your teeth kicked in and being humbled and realizing just because you're at Oklahoma doesn't mean you're going to win national championships or go 12-0 every year. When you get humbled pretty good like OU is right now, you realize how hard it is to win at the highest level that programs like Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson do. And I think that this can be a valuable building year, momentum year, proving to high school seniors and juniors how bad we need them and convincing them that they need to be at Oklahoma and the plan to correct it. And the plan to correct it, they are involved in that plan and that they're building a program and a foundation to have them come in and be successful. And I'm looking at the bigger picture. While yes, this year is disappointing. Trevor Knight also, your years at Oklahoma weren't always great either. So what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, whenever you first mentioned that quote to me before we started recording, I immediately went back to his last year at Oklahoma as a starter before Baker took his job and he ended up transferring to A&M. He went 8-5. Like, did he believe that was a failure of a year? Because I believe that year they started off hot and then ended up losing a ton towards the end, if I remember it correctly. I think for the players that are currently on the team and Brent Venables, yeah, you're probably not going to compete for the Big 12 championship, but you have to, light that fire under your ass every single week leading up and every Saturday so you can learn how to win in this culture that he's trying to build. I think Josh Pate said it. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with him, but he has a show for 24/7 and CBS. Venables is trying to establish a completely new culture, break down what Lincoln Riley had and establish his own thing. It's not an easy task to do. I think we all kind of took that for granted. No one really understood how difficult that could be when he's really trying to turn this thing a whole 360. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. It's got to get shitty before it gets worse, it looks like. Obviously, none of us wanted that to be the case, but that is what we are seeing in front of our eyes. It's gotten worse before hopefully it gets better in the coming games and years. But a failed season, I think, is a shit thing to say, especially as a guy that played for Oklahoma himself, not having a great season in his final year, and then having to transfer because you got beat out by a transfer walk-on. Like it doesn't seem fair for him to say that about this team who's still learning. Like you said, a lot of young guys. I mean, a stat that people love to throw out at the beginning of the year before any games were played is 40% of this team has never played a football game at the college level. That matters. Obviously, we didn't think it mattered that much because we still thought that the people filling in for those that left were going to be good enough. But I don't know. My overall thought, I wish I could have heard the entire clip, but just from the quote that I read and after you mentioned it to me, just seems like he's very disappointed, which is fine. We all are as fans, but it's shitty to say that the season is as a whole is a failure only 5 games in. If he wants to say that game 10 or 11, fine. But game 5, like going into game 6, there's still enough of the schedule left for Oklahoma to turn it around and get excitement started for next season. Once you have a whole new recruiting class come in, if you can end this year, our predictions were like 8-4, 7-5. If you can end this year winning games and maybe games you aren't supposed to win, like and ruin people's seasons, like Baylor and Oklahoma State, Kansas, even they might be undefeated when they come to Norman. If we can ruin some team seasons, that in itself, I think, obviously not a total W, but it is at least showing that they're trending in the right direction.
For sure. And I think it's all about momentum and all of like recent, if you finish the season strong, you go 4 or 5-0 or whatever, it feels a lot different than when you look at the season as a whole and you go 7-5. If the team's 2-5 and then you win the last 5 games, you're like, wow, okay, we've got a lot of momentum going into next year. That's the whole deal, is how can this team respond and how can they finish the last 7 games? Because right now, yeah, it's bad. It's not looking great. Got to take a whole picture, but we're going to see how this team responds. I think the coaches are going to have a heart to heart, and I'm sure they already have. I'm sure that they're working through a bunch of things. I think this team's going to be ready to play when it comes time against Texas, and I don't think it's a lost season. I think there's a lot of things to take from this year that will be foundational learning lessons for this team in the next year or two.
And
So
Venables brought up last year's Clemson team. They were 4-3 and ended up winning 10 games when it was all said and done. I mean, this year going into the season, I think they were ranked 5th, right? And they still are, and they look like one of the best teams in the country. Like, things can, even though it's not an amazing year for a specific program like in Oklahoma, it can still teach a lot and get the guys prepared for the next season, especially since the team is relatively young. I mean, Billy Bowman is a first-year starter. I mean, I guess he started last year, but he was kind of getting jerked around to all different positions. It's a first-year starter as a safety, looking really good. Danny Stutzman, a first-year starter, looking good. I mean, it hasn't looked amazing, but looked good at points, and I think can improve. Reggie Grimes, a first-year starter. Ethan Downs, a first-year starter. Jeffrey Johnson, a first year at Oklahoma. Jalen Redmond is probably one of the most experienced guys on the team. Woody Washington, experienced guy, but I mean, then you got Jaden Davis, also a first-year starter. This is still on the defense. Like, most of the defense is first-year starters outside of 3 or 4 guys. And then on the offensive side, the line has had some issues and rotation because of injury. Brand new quarterback, a new starting running back, 2 new starting running backs, and it looks like a guy that might get some more playing time in Javonte Barnes. The wide receivers are really the most experienced guys on that team. There is a lot of newness in this team again, which we all kind of disregarded going into the season, but it's obviously starting to kick Oklahoma in the butt because they don't have the experience on the field that it seems like they need to know how to win games, especially when, like the Kansas State game, obviously we lost and Adrian Martinez had an amazing game and they deserved to win, but Oklahoma was not completely out of it, even in the 4th quarter. There was opportunities for Oklahoma to win and they just shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah. I mean, and you look across this roster, there aren't a lot of guys that are seniors this year. And so a lot of these guys will be coming back, but he's going to add a bunch of new talent through the, high school ranks, with this class and probably the transfer portal as well. I think overall it's going to be fine. I still think it's going to be closer than people think about this game this weekend. You might even surprise some people and win. So it'll be interesting to see. So I think that's all I've got for today. Or unless you've got something else, I mean, we're obviously going to do a full game preview on Friday, but wanted to kind of provide some injury updates, some thoughts, and various other things. Do you have anything else?
No, I'm excited for the game, and hopefully you're right. Maybe Oklahoma can pull off a win and upset Texas.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have an individual challenge for the people?
Just tell us your thoughts. What do you think this Oklahoma team can do? Because I know some people are on our side, and some people are a little bit on the with a cloud over their head, thinking that Oklahoma might as well go 3-9 at this point, and expecting a 3-9 season.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But anyway, so be sure to let us know what you think about where this team is, what your expectations are, and various other things. And this far, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and Apple and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And we will be back on Friday. Thanks.